Good morning. Welcome to PIL Webinar 62. My colleague is a robot, emerging technology and the procurement process. I'm Monica with the PIL, and I'm joined by my colleague Scott. Scott, are you there?
Alexa, start PIL Webinar 62.
I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Okay, Google, launch PIL Webinar 62.
Can you rephrase your question?
Siri, start the webinar.
No, Scott.
Scott, is everything okay?
Well, I'm trying to use my robot assistant to help with the webinar today.
Scott, I don't think AI will help with the webinar, but I know that it can help with de-obligations and modifications. Watch this. D, start my modification.
As you wish, Monica.
Scott, it looks like my AI is better than yours. Well, before we get started with this Emerging Technologies webinar, we have some brief housekeeping to take care of. First, sign in with your full name and DHS email address using the chat pod to prove you attended this webinar and get your credit. If you didn't type your name and email address in the chat pod when you entered the seminar room, please go ahead and type that in now. For example, monica.taylor@hq.dhs.gov. If you registered or didn't register in advance of today's webinar, just go ahead and do the same process. Type your full name and email address in the chat pod. If you did not register on CSOD, you will need to track the CLPs you earned today manually. If you're on the phone only, then please email us at pil@hq.dhs.gov sometime today, and we will confirm your attendance for credit. If you do not type your email in the chat pod, then we will have no way of adjudicating your attendance for credit, so please do so. If we jump from one pod to the next, you do not need to re-enter your name again. We'll have that record in Adobe. If you type your email once, then you're good. Now, for a quick orientation for those that haven't attended before, or it's been a while, in the bottom right corner we have the chat box. Not only is this where you'll type in your full name and DH email address for credit, it's also where you can submit your questions at any time. We have dedicated PIL staff monitoring the questions, so please don't leave a question in your hip pocket. We don't want this to be a one-way conversation where the audience asks the PIL questions. We encourage you all to interact with each other. So feel free to respond to your colleagues when there's something you want to address. For those of you unable to sign into Adobe and are on the phone with the PowerPoint slides, you can still participate in the conversation. Email your question and comments to the PIL inbox at pil@hq.dhs.gov. We have PIL team members standing by to take your questions. On the bottom middle of the screen is where you can find some helpful PIL links. To the top right, you can find the downloads box where you can access and download the documents. Just click the upper right-hand drop-down to download all. You'll see some poll questions throughout the presentation, so keep an eye out and be sure to respond. In fact, 2 are up for you to respond right now. Finally, there's a full screen option. Just click the square with the 4 little arrows to maximize and then click it again to minimize. That wraps up the clerical piece items.
Well, let's talk about previously on the PIL.
Webinar 61 was titled Price, Price, Baby, all about pricing. This 1-hour special webinar featured a senior member from the pricing team within the DHS Office of the Chief Procurement Officer's Acquisition Policy and Oversight Division. The team took a deep dive into pricing efficiencies and topics such as right-sizing what vendors must submit in their price submissions, documenting the price analysis, the fair and reasonableness determination, and new innovation technique called rates-only pricing. You can find a recording of this webinar on the PIL homepage. On the line with us today, besides Scott and myself, we are joined by Sarah Hoot from the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. Can you come on and say hi to everyone, Sarah?
Hello.
All right, and we have Barbara Bruff from the Office of the Chief Information Security Officer.
Good morning, everybody.
All right, Ronnie Namata and Joe Millard from the Customs and Border Protection.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, and and David Larimore will be joining us later, DHS Chief Technology Officer. We'll hear more from all of them soon, but first, let's go over the poll question.
Well, our first poll question asked, what is your job series? And it looks like about 30% are contracting officers, contract specialists. We have over 55% today are program managers, cores, or other technical folks. We've got a couple of procurement analysts and a few others. That's great. We're glad that you're all here. We also asked, how many webinars have you attended? And it looks like, wow, there's 34 people out there that have attended over 10 webinars. That is great. Well, we're glad that you're all here. We're also really glad to have with us Nina Ferraro. Nina is the DHS Deputy Chief Procurement Officer. She's going to kick us off with the tone from the top. Nina, thanks for being with us today. Take it away.
Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Awesome, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be able to join you today for this webinar. Love the answers to those poll questions. It shows how this excitement around the webinars is not just a one and done. People are coming back for more, and I'm thrilled to hear that. Obviously, these sessions really do equip everybody in the procurement community to really deliver on some innovative solutions. So today's webinar around emerging technology is a timely and exciting topic. You guys know that when we hear about robots in the workplace, I think sometimes we want to lean towards thinking about super sophisticated stuff like maybe the Matrix or the Terminator. But I've been assured by the team here that it's nothing as scary as that. In fact, it's probably a lot more like your Roomba vacuum, if you have one, going around the floor and picking up all the little crumbs. So that's not scary, except if you have a dog or a cat, and then it might be scary. But in all seriousness, emerging technology is truly going to help make our jobs easier by really helping us pick up all of those crumbs. And you might ask, well, how, Nina? And, I just kind of challenge you all to ask yourselves, just imagine for a minute every tedious, time-consuming task that you have to do each day. And then when you think about removing those, and think about what do you have left? What time do you now have available that you didn't have available before to do that higher value work? What would your new day look like, right? So your presence here today is truly evidence that there is a thirst and a hunger for these kinds of innovations at DHS. Paul Courtney, our Chief Procurement Officer, and myself, we worked pretty hard on our new strategic plans, and in it, we really emphasized the importance of innovation and procuring emerging technology. And if you haven't seen it, you can find it on our OCPO homepage on DHS Connect. But to innovate, we really have to build solutions that can anticipate not just our own needs, but those of our customers. And this is surely going to help us better serve the mission and to truly put our people first. And I know we've got, customers on the line here on the webinar, and we know that people want to get through the procurement process as fast as they possibly can and as painlessly as possible so that they can get back to their important jobs that they do day to day. So with that in mind, what technologies can we really implement to make the process easier for our customers, right? For example, could we use artificial intelligence to streamline the way we do market research? Or, can robotic process automation help us with closeouts and DEOBs? The answer is yes. And when we do procure emerging technology, we've got to exploit data and new technologies so that we can optimize the process. And that in turn is going to lead us to the better outcome. So ask yourself, what emerging technology can do to help you award a contract? Or what part of the process is the most tedious? And as we continue to look at ways to address those challenges, I'm going to put a little plug in here. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another new instrument that we're using to drive change and innovation, and that's the PIL Idea Competition. And it directly aligns to the CPO's first strategic priority, which is to empower our workforce to excel by giving people the opportunity to enhance our processes and inspire a culture of innovation. So the Idea Competition uses crowdsourcing to tap into your hidden talents, that of our workforce, and to improve the processes that tend to hold us back and inhibit innovation. So the PIL's right now soliciting opportunities for the idea competitions, and they'll work with the teams who are crafting the competitions to address any impediments that they see to innovation. You can submit your challenges by talking to any of our PIL coaches or by visiting the IDEA competition portal, which is, again, is on our DHS Connect page. And while you're there, not only should you look at that, but also, as I said earlier, peruse our strategic plan. And I'll put a plug in for our Mission First Procurement campaign, which really shares important stories about how we're already using technology, including AI and RPA here at DHS. So to close, I want to be clear, emerging technology is not going away. It's here to help us do our jobs better, to serve our customers, and to help us better meet our missions. Training like this webinar, are a truly great start to getting us there. So I want to thank the PIL team and for hosting this session, as well as all of the special guests who were introduced, who are going to join on this topic. I hope all of you find opportunities to apply what you've learned today. So back to you, Scott and Monica, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much, Nina, for those inspiring words. Really appreciate your time today. Well, let's jump right into the content. Today, we're here to talk to you all about emerging technology and the procurement process. You may not know it, but you're already working alongside a few bots, and you're going to hear about that soon. But before we do, let's spend a little bit of time learning about the different kinds of emerging technology that's out there. We're going to learn about AI, RPA, ML, NLP, and if you don't know what that alphabet means, that's okay. We're going to walk you through everything. We're also going to have a very special guest. The Chief Technology Officer for DHS, David Larimore, is going to join us, and we're going to ask him about his favorite droids, both in Star Wars and Star Trek. And if you've got a favorite droid, you can drop it in the chat anytime you'd like. After that, we're going to hear from a specialist on the authority to operate process at FedRAMP 2. She's going to walk us through all of those security things we need to do to keep our software safe. And then finally, we're going to talk with a team from CBP who's putting all of these pieces together to award contracts faster, more efficiently, and more accurately. We've got a lot of guests from us today. From DHS headquarters is Sarah Hout. She's an IT project manager with the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. Also from DHS headquarters is Barbara Bruck. She's the FedRAMP JAB team lead over at the Office of the Chief Information Security Officer. And we've got a few familiar faces for those of you out there that join us lots. We've got Ronnie Namata and Joe Millard. Both are in the contracting shop over at CBP's Procurement Innovation Team. They also like to dabble with emerging technology in the evening and make bots in their workshops. But we're also going to hear from, those are the human team members. We're going to hear from some bot team members too. In the middle, we've got Dora. She's a little bot from the Department of the Army. She helps with the responsibility process. And on the far right is Dee. She's a bot from Customs and Border Protection that Ronnie has brought with him, and she's been trained to perform de-obligations. Now, unfortunately, Evie wasn't able to join us today. She's been retired, but I didn't want her to feel left out because she was one of our first robots, and so a big shout out to Evie as well, our E-Verify bot. Now, as usual, this is the place where we tell you about all of the procurement innovations that you're going to be hearing about during the show, but today, of course, we don't have any procurement innovations to talk to you about. We've got something different. We've got technology innovations to talk to you about. And by the end of the show, I promise you, these clouds are not just going to be clouds anymore. These are going to be firm ideas for you to understand. You're also going to see how we implement them within the procurement process, not just for someone else, but to make our jobs easier, to make them go faster, and to do them better. So we're going to hear about all of this as we go along. Now first, I think it's time we start our show. Let's bring on our first guest. As I mentioned, it's Sarah Hout. She is the IT project manager with the DHS Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
We can hear you great, Sarah. We don't need a robot to tell us that. Well, it seems like the most common type of artificial intelligence or emerging technology that everyone's talking about is this thing called robotic process automation. Now, I've heard people call it RPA and I've heard people call it bots, but what is an RPA?
Well, RPA is software that can perform rules-based, repetitive tasks that are typically performed by a person interacting with a computer. So as an example, somebody copying data out of an Excel spreadsheet and pasting it into an online system. This is something that a bot can do instead of a person.
Well, that's fantastic. So all those redundant emails that I send over and over again, a bot could do. Well, I've heard that there's two types of bots, and the first is called an attended bot. What does it mean that it's an attended bot?
So an attended bot is a bot that's loaded on a person's workstation, and it can only be initiated by the person using that workstation. So the person kicks off what we call the automation. Sometimes people also call that a bot, but they kick off the process, and then once they kick it off, the bot carries on and does the work. This is probably the easiest RPA technology to set up. It's relatively inexpensive, and you don't really need an authority to operate to have this loaded on your desktop, since it's just essentially end-user software.
Excellent. So that's an attended bot. Before we get to an unattended bot, I've got a question about an attended bot. And Sarah, if you can speak up when you answer, that would be great. When I'm using an attended bot, can I still use my computer while the bot is running?
In most cases, no. It depends. It depends on what you are using your computer for and what the bot is doing, but it's advisable to not use your computer while the bot is running, because you can disrupt the bot and then it will fail.
So that's maybe a downside to the attended bot. So what is then an unattended bot?
An unattended bot is a bot that it typically resides in the cloud. It can be used by multiple people, and it doesn't require one individual to kick it off or tell it to go. It's also available 24/7, so it can do much, much more work than an attended bot can do. It is more complex to implement because it requires network credentials, just like you and I do. We have a PIV card. The bot has to have a way to be able to log into the network, and it also requires an IT security authority to operate.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like it's a better bot. It can do more things, but it's also a little bit more involved. And so you've got to spend a bit more time, spend a bit more money, but you get a better result maybe.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Now I understand you've brought a sample with you, Dora, that she is an example of an unattended bot. So Sarah, walk us through, how does Dora work?
So Dora, many of you are familiar with the contractor responsibility determination process, and Dora is an unattended bot that supports that process. It was developed, as Scott had mentioned, by the Department of the Army, and an end user sends an email to this bot. In the subject line of the email, they include the DUNS number. As an aside, that DUNS number will go away on the 4th of April, and they will have to use a UEI number after that. But they send this DUNS number to Dora. Dora takes that information. She goes to SAM.gov. She goes to FAPIS. She gathers all of the documentation required for that contracting officer to conduct that responsibility determination. And she even drafts a memo with some of boxes checked off based on the information she finds, so that the contracting officer just has to take that information, review it, and make the ultimate determination. But the nice thing about Dora is she does all the background work so that the contracting officer can focus on other things.
That's fantastic, Sarah. And so that's a great example of an unattended bot. You just send Dora the email and she does all the work for you. You don't have to do anything besides send that email, and it just takes a couple of seconds, I think, you know, for the email to get out, to come back, and everything else. Dora works very fast. So that's bots. Those are RPAs. Those are that's robotic process automation, which some people call RPA or bots. Let's move to something else. let's talk about something more complicated now, maybe a little bit scarier, right? Artificial intelligence. When some people think about this, they might think of Skynet from the Terminator, but it's really not that scary, right, Sarah?
Right. It's actually, it's just a little bit more advanced technology than RPA, and it mimics human thought and reasoning, and many of us see artificial intelligence every day. If you have a phone that uses facial recognition to unlock, then you have artificial intelligence right in your hand right now.
Now what about this subset of artificial intelligence that's called machine learning? What's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Machine learning is technology that uses algorithms to imitate the way that humans learn. And another example of this, I'll go back to that cell phone. If you have an iPhone and you use Siri, as an example, I go to the pool on Monday morning. I've never done anything to my phone, but somehow my phone knows I go to the pool on Monday mornings, and it tells me the pool is an 8-minute drive and traffic is light. And it has just learned that based on the technology within my phone where I go on a regular basis.
Now sometimes machine learning also you can tell because it's asking for a prompt. And so if you're using something where like a chatbot, sometimes at the end it'll ask you, is this helpful? What happens when you click that box, yes or no?
You are teaching the model or the software that the information it's providing, whether or not that information is good or bad. That is another example of machine learning.
Right, exactly. So we're all familiar with these things. We're just going to start learning them and working with them at work eventually. And you brought another example. This is one that you told me about the first time. It's called the PSC search tool. And it helps to answer this question that we've all had. What is the best product service code, or what's the best NAICS for my requirements? How does the PSC search tool work with that?
So the way it was originally developed, a little bit of history, as a project for Naval Postgraduate School. And what the student did who developed this did was he built this very simple tool. There's a field you can put a description in. When he originally set this up, people would enter a description. The tool would search through descriptions of product service codes and NAICS codes, and it would display the matches that were close. And then there was a thumbs up and a thumbs down button next to each one of the matches. And the user would tell the tool, yes, this is a good, appropriate match, or no, it's not. And through this process, the tool was able to refine searches so that now it's very, very accurate.
Fantastic. Great tool out there. This is an open tool. You can go to fscpsc.com and you can try it out today. You can search for products. You can search for services. You can search for NAICS. You can search for PSCs. And it doesn't just give you one. It'll give you a bunch of different ones that it thinks applies. And Sarah had this great example of snow shoveling. Why don't you tell me that example, Sarah?
Oh, in terms of snow removal, if I do a search on snow removal in this tool, there's one NAICS code that is highway snow removal, and there's also landscaping. And when you run a search in the PSC search tool, both of those will come up.
Perfect. Now that is artificial intelligence if I've ever heard it. Monica, I think we've got a poll out there.
Yes. So how familiar are you with bots and artificial intelligence? And it looks like the majority of you said not very. Had a few that had somewhat. So we're glad that you're here today to learn a little more about that.
All right. So we've covered RPAs. We covered artificial intelligence. We covered machine learning. Now, I understand there's something else that's even more complicated. It's called sentiment analysis, which sounds an awful lot like robots are trying to understand how I feel. Sarah, what is sentiment analysis?
Sentiment analysis uses something called natural language processing to review narrative text and identify positive, negative, and neutral comments or words.
That's right. And so if a good word might be something like, what's the next visual there? It might be something like good, exceptional, really well, on time, right? Whereas a neutral word might be okay, satisfactory, met. You know, these are all kind of words that we know. And a bad one might be, oh, the worst, terrible, late. These all have dictionary definitions that we can recognize as being good or being bad. Now, sentiment analysis is actually something that the PIL is using. After every project, we talk with all the vendors that participated, and we talk to them and we ask them, were our innovations effective or ineffective? And we wanted to know whether their answers were positive, negative, or neutral. And Sarah, I think that your colleague helped us to put this tool together. How does it work?
He did. He developed this using software called Power BI. And within Power BI, there is an artificial intelligence insight module. I believe they just call it AI Insight. And it took him a bit to build the first report within this application, but built subsequent reports very quickly. And he does not have a very in-depth background with programming, but he was able to pick this up relatively quickly and learn it. And as you can see on the screen here, there's a pie chart on the left, and it shows the distribution of positive, negative, and neutral comments from this survey. And I believe, yeah, there's 1,000 responses in here. So if you or I were to sit down and try to read through 1,000 responses, it would probably take weeks to do this. But
That's
I
right.
think this tool does it in a few minutes.
And I love that concept that your colleague was able to build this, and I don't think that Peter has any kind of background in information technology, or he's not an engineer or anything like that. A lot of these tools that we're talking about today, anybody can go into and just start using right away, because all of this technology is in the background, right? It's just like Siri, where you ask, you know, Siri, make me a sandwich. This one here, it reads through, you can see the red box there, it reads through that box, which is fairly small, but it says, it started off well until questions were being asked. And it just keeps looking through that, and it assigns it a negative connotation and says, you know, this is closer to negative than it is to positive. And it just keeps adding that up, and as we go through things, we get a really nice, what they call corpus or backlog of items there. So it's a really nice tool. Monica, I think we had another poll out there.
Yeah, so we had a poll on this technology. We asked, do you believe AI can understand tone, emotion, just from typed words? And it looks like most of you, 42% said maybe. If you're one of the people who said no, or only if they are emojis, then you might be surprised to learn that you've already used this at home. Like I said, if you use social media, a lot of companies are already monitoring what's posted to determine whether their branding is not. So those are really good polls.
Excellent. Now, Sarah, before I let you go, what do you think are the most important benefits of emerging technology, especially for our workforce?
I think the most important benefits are that our emerging technology can handle some of the workload in the workforce that has a really, really high workload, so that, that those people can focus on the more important tasks. And it also can increase accuracy, particularly on those tedious tasks that require a significant attention to detail, but are just very repetitive.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much, Sarah. And thanks so much for everything. It looks like we've got a lot of excitement in the chat. Daryl says, I want a bot to assist me getting through the S&T PR compliance and privacy reviews. Well, Daryl, that's a great suggestion. Let's see how we can work it out. Sarah, thanks for explaining some of the processes with us today. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. I'm Happy to do it.
All right. Next up, I'm super excited to have with us Mr. David Larimore. David is the DHS Chief Technology Officer, and I'll have to say he's a diehard Star Wars fan as well. So David, welcome to the show. Are you out there?
I am. Can you hear me? Am I coming through okay?
Coming through great, David. Yeah.
Wonderful. Hey, good morning, everyone.
Let's jump right in. How are emerging technologies helping the DHS mission? And if you can speak up just a little bit, it'd be great, David.
Sure, I'll try to do that. Keep the headset a little closer. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, one of the best use cases I like to bring forward is everything related to the customer experience, right? So there has been a huge initiative ever since Eric Heisen came on board at the beginning of last year. And it has caused us to really look at our utilization of biometrics and artificial intelligence around biometrics for things like TSA's contactless travel program, the ability for you to be able to show up in an airport and instead of having to physically touch, physically hand documents, use biometric and mobile phones to be able to share that identity information to be able to move you along on your way.
Yeah,
one example.
That contactless travel, that sounds really important during a pandemic.
Yes, absolutely, right? It's crucial, and it's ironic, but the pandemic has taught us a lot about what we don't know. It has really forced us to look at emerging technologies, to look at biometrics, to look at artificial intelligence, to try and solve problems that we hope to prevent any future issues, right? So how can we make changes today that prepare us for the future?
Exactly. Now, how does your office, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, how do you help implement these emerging technologies across the enterprise?
Well, that's the fun part. Okay, so the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, we call it the CTOD, Chief Technology Officer Directorate, has several points in which we interact with DHS. The first and foremost is going to be program engagement, right? So when you look at all of the big A acquisition programs, we work from the very, very beginning or the inception, the needs phase, all the way through to operations and disposition. We actually, between our enterprise architecture board, between our technical assessments, tech stats, and all of our various processes, we actually work directly with the programs to provide best practices, to provide reviews on all of their architecture documentation, system documentation, et cetera. We also have what's called our technology lifecycle. So when technology, and we call them technology initiatives, right? So the idea is, CX, our customer experience, is there's not a specific technology around it, right? So we don't tend to use just technologies, but technology enablers, things that kind of help us build and deliver faster. So our technology lifecycle will take a specific topic of interest. It could be everything from biometrics to artificial intelligence to agile to cloud to DevOps. And we will do everything from work on department-wide policy to guidance to management directorates. We will work on setting up pilots, vendor engagement. So we will actually go out to industry and we'll partner with offices like the PIL here. And we actually had our CX roundtable. That was kind of an executive leadership engagement with OCIO last week. That was really successful. We had dozens of kind of industry association representatives coming to talk about CX, right? So that's kind of the second side. The third side of things is we look at how we can operationalize technology. So we work on department-wide implementations, right? So whether we're talking about zero trust, whether we're talking about enterprise networking, et cetera. So my office has a division specifically devoted to tracking, implementing, managing, whether it's procurement side of things, whether it's managing, technology implementation, standards, best practices for enterprise-wide deployments of technology.
That sounds all super exciting, David. Now, there's a lot of emerging technology out there. So when you're talking to someone who's just looking to start, what do you tell them so that they don't end up like C-3PO here with their head all turned around by a Wookiee?
Oh my goodness. So happy that brings me so much joy. First and foremost, start small, right? So really good innovative technology. It never starts as a $50 million acquisition. You know, all real kind of points of innovation, you start small, right? So whether it's leveraging open source, whether it's leveraging tools and technologies you have on hand, you know, start looking at the scientific and education communities out there and start adopting small and just trying out different things, fail fast. You know, we talk about the concepts of agile here. And once you start getting a grasp of the technology and start becoming, it becomes a more important integrated aspect of your program or whatever mission set that you are supporting, then you start looking at what is the vendor community going inside of that area and how can this be a more broadly adopted set of technologies and practices, et cetera.
What about the opportunity to pilot? Is that part of Start Small?
Yes, so pilots are very important, but the trick is you got to have an end date, right? There has to be some mechanism in which you say, was this pilot successful, and what are the next steps? I think that a lot of groups will start pilots and they don't end them. There doesn't tend to be that startup mindset. So pilots are incredible, and they're such a powerful tool and mechanism for being able to bring emerging technology, or just, you know, we talk about emerging technology, but any technology, you know, a pilot is a great way to evaluate its effectiveness inside of a specific organization. But always look at making those pilots smaller, shorter turnarounds, and then evaluating the effectiveness of that pilot and determining what the organization needs to do next.
Awesome advice, David. Really appreciate that. That's so cool. Now, you mentioned earlier about the executive orders. There's been a lot of those coming out. So how do you determine whether it's at the end of a pilot, or how do you just determine overall whether an emerging technology is valuable to the government?
Ooh, good question. So there are 3 executive orders that my office is kind of involved in right now. One of them is related to artificial intelligence, a second one related to customer experience, and the third one related to zero trust. Pilots are a piece of the puzzle when it comes to trying out new technologies. So for example, at headquarters, we did a pilot called for a technology called Zscaler, which is a zero trust kind of network endpoint, and you know, it's a replacement for traditional VPN, right? And it's been a very successful pilot, but the hard part was not the pilot. The pilot was actually very easy. The hard part was then transitioning that into operations and working with our peers in IT operations to deploy it. But at the end of the day, what it really came down to was getting buy-in from all the various parties, right? So it took buy-in from our peers in CFO and Chico, in IT operations, et cetera, CSO, you know, program acquisition, risk management, PARM, you know, all of them working together to decide this is what we need to work on next.
Yeah. And of course, the emerging technologies that we have too, they're not just for us with Zscaler and how we do business internally, but you know, our customers, whether they're going through TSA or whether they're coming into the border or whatever else, and how it impacts those customers and the citizen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've got a question here. Do you have any, it's from Dr. Raymond Marbury. Are there any pilots right now for a mass scale digitalization?
Ooh. So, and I'm assuming what we're referring to is, you know, taking traditional paper forms of processing and digitizing them. There is not a kind of big enterprise one. We have what's called the PRA, the Paperwork Reduction Act, and that has actually been a priority for DHS OCIO. We are at the stage now where we are trying to prioritize the burden reduction across the board, right? So the individual technologies, we have not necessarily kind of identified or prioritized technologies, but a lot of the work we're doing there is really focusing on how can we reduce the paperwork burden of all of our customers. And what we have found is there is not always a single line evolution between the purpose of the PRA and the customer experience, right? So the PRA is heavily focused on that burden reduction around taking physical documentation and converting it into a digital to make it easier, accessible, and mobile and all those things. Customer experience is talking about how can we take that user experience and really simplify it. And so a lot of the challenges that we have are being able to meet all the objectives from the PRA work and the legislation around that, and still being able to find ways to use CX to basically say, is that form truly necessary anymore? So we're really spending a lot more time on the policy aspects of things. We're spending a lot more time on the prioritization of the PRA efforts than we are currently on kind of enterprise digitization technologies. But I do know that USCIS, I've worked with Rob Brown, the CTO over USCIS, has been working so hard on a lot of initiatives around A-file, digitization there. So really proud of their efforts.
Well, that actually dovetails right into my next question. We got a question from Chad Parker, who's the innovation advocate over at USCIS. He asks, does your office ever have a technology day where vendors can come in and demo cool new tech and tools for you?
So we do have that. So we in OCIO at headquarters, we have our vendor engagement lead, and we have a couple activities we do. We generally put them into 3 buckets, right? So the first bucket is how do we continually to build the relationships we have, right? So we have a lot of vendors, we have a lot of partners, and we need to constantly build the relationships that we have, right? So it's not just about the contract, it's not just about the deliverables, it's about the relationship between the vendor and the government that leads to success. The second side of things is topic-based and priority-based. So that's when I referred to the vendor roundtable from last week. So that was meant to be a more open discussion. So this is where we look at segments of technology, right? So customer experience being one, zero trust being another, and say we're going to look at specific vendors, look at specific integrators that are kind of best of breed in these areas, bring them together, have an open topic and discussion and conversation with executive leadership to kind of figure out what we don't know. And then the third side of things is fun. It is probably one of the most fun, and that is new to government products and technology. So this is where you look at companies that have, recently got their, Series A, Series B, Series C funding from venture capitalists and are starting to build a federal practice and are ready to kind of enter the marketplace, have a specific technology, which so many are around the cyberspace these days. But anyway, so that's the third part of our little trident of vendor engagement that we have.
Awesome. Well, we're into overtime, but I know that the next question is going to be a really good one. So we've talked a lot about Star Wars out here, and I thought this one really flips your lid. This is, everyone's favorite droid is not BB-8. It's actually Commander Data from Star Trek. And when I was thinking about this last question, I was thinking, emerging technology is a lot like the Prime Directive or the Hippocratic Oath, like do no harm. So how do you determine which emerging technology is the best fit for an organization?
Right. So there's a lot of schools of thought around this. One of the biggest things that I harp on with my team is anytime that we bring on a new technology, how can we get rid of old legacy technologies, right? So when we are looking at the efficacy of specific emerging technologies, specific AI models that can be run and the various open source and proprietary tools, we say, will this allow us to get rid of a legacy technology, right? Some whether we're talking about mainframes or we're talking about, getting rid of on-premise data center or requirements around that, how can this emerging technology allow us to shed this legacy technology so then we can start, reinvesting those funds into that emerging technology, right? So that's one of the hardest things about being the federal government is, how do you find ways to invest into emerging technologies? And a lot of that is by trying to shed a lot of the legacy or proprietary infrastructure that we may have.
So true. David, this has been a fantastic conversation, both about emerging technology and Star Wars and Star Trek and everything else. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic conversation with David Larimore, our DHS Chief Technology Officer. Up next, we've got a really great conversation with Barbara Bruff. Barbara is the FedRAMP JAB team lead with the DHS Office of the Chief Information Security Officer, and she's here to tell us what all of those things that I just said mean. So Barbara, welcome to the show.
Good morning, everybody.
All right, first question, we'll start off with an easy one, I think. What is an authority to operate?
Well, basically the authority to operate process ensures that any IT systems or services that you guys want to purchase meet all of the federal security requirements, like for FISMA or OMB or DHS directives, things like that.
So it's like keeping our software and keeping our hardware safe from bad guys like hackers or causing trouble within the system.
Absolutely, and that you're meeting your legal requirement for taking care.
Now, I've heard some people say that there's not just an ATO, the authority to operate, but there's also like a provisional ATO or a temporary one. Is that something that DHS uses?
Well, there is something called an authority to proceed, which is sort of like a mini ATO. Basically, it has a subset of only the critical controls that need to be assessed to determine if the system meet requirements, and then the system is given a year to complete the assessment on the rest of the controls. Provisional authority to operate, I'll talk about a little bit more when we go into the FedRAMP stuff.
All right, a mini ATO. I like that. I think people are going to like a mini ATO if that's applicable to them. All right, next question though. When do I need an ATO?
This is the tricky question. Basically, anytime you're looking at IT services or IT systems, you need to ask whether or not an ATO is appropriate. So for that end, I have some information I'm going to post on who to contact if you're not sure. If you have general questions about ATOs, you can contact Robert Walther at DHS headquarters to see whether or not we think your system would require an ATO. And then if you actually need to set up an ATO, you probably need to get a hold of your component CISO shop. Okay.
Now, we've got a poll out there. It's asking folks how long they think an ATO takes. It looks like, I don't know, a few people think it takes a few weeks. It looks like almost 50% say a few months. There's a few people that think way more than a year. About 30 people out there say way more than a year, and there's just some people that are being honest that say, I have no idea, and that's the group that I'm in. So Barbara, how long does an ATO take?
Actually, they're all correct. It depends on the ATO, but I've seen them take up to almost 2 years. And,
okay.
The TSA that was on for Zscaler, I believe Zscaler was actually a pretty long ATO. And that's also some of the work that I'm doing for DHS is to try and streamline that process. We've begun the update to 4300A, which is a part of that, as well as determining what controls are inheritable from JAB systems, JAB FedRAMP systems. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the FedRAMP stuff.
All right. Well, we talked about the ATO a little bit, and you mentioned this FedRAMP thing. So what is a FedRAMP? Is it like something on a highway? What do we got going on here?
It's not roadkill, I promise. FedRAMP stands for Federal Risk Authorization Management Program, and basically it is the federal government's cloud security compliance program.
Okay, so it's sort of like security for things that go into the cloud, and cloud is something that's not hosted in our data center. It's hosted in somewhere else's data center, like Amazon or Azure. So how does a FedRAMP authorization help with the DHS authorization to operate?
Well, first of all, FedRAMP has the Joint Authorization Board, which is made up of GSA, DOD, and DHS as the technical arm. What we do is we look at systems that want to do work with government, and we give them a provisional authority to operate, which means that they meet all of the security requirements put out there by FISMA, OMB, DHS, you name it. We have a team of people that do the initial assessments. We allow for no exceptions to security controls. So at the end of the process, when we give them a JAB authorization, a PATO authorization, any agency can leverage that ATO, and then with the controls, that are in place, the security controls, any controls that meet or exceed that agency's requirement can be consumed by the agency. They do not need to reassess them. They are inheritable.
Okay, and so if someone, go ahead.
This speeds up the ATO process tremendously.
I was just going to say it. So it sounds like if they have a FedRAMP Joint Authorization Board authorization, that can really speed things up a lot.
Yes. So whenever they're looking at purchasing services, I would recommend strongly that they look at JAB authorized services first. Not only is it going to speed up the ATO process, but we also handle all of the continuous monitoring, maintenance of the system, annual assessments, and we make sure that they continue to meet those requirements.
And if you're looking for a list of people that have the JAB authorization, you can click on the FedRAMP logo here. It's hot linked. It'll take you right to that list. The FedRAMP group does a great job of maintaining that list because there is a difference sometimes between the FedRAMP and the JAB, right, Barbara?
Yes, there's JAB authorizations and there's agency authorizations under FedRAMP. Agency authorizations are done by the agency. They are not required to use a FedRAMP 3PAO for the assessment, and they can have exceptions to the controls. So when you leverage one of their ATOs, you may have to do a full assessment on the system, and you would be fully responsible for monitoring the continuous monitoring, meaning reviewing and making sure that the annual assessments are done and that they meet the requirements, making sure that they continue to scan, making sure that you review and approve significant change requests, and that you monitor any incidents.
And so it's buyer beware there. Go ahead.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a little bit more involved, and you need more resources to do an agency authorization. I'm going to be doing a training on this, which I think is on your next slide, and I'll provide information to that if anybody's interested. And I really recommend that the acquisition folks may want to attend this training, as we're going to be going over a lot of these kinds of questions.
Perfect, and we will get to that. We've got the link to that on the slide after this. Now, I also understand there's lots of DHS policies out there, so what kind of policies can people be looking at when they're thinking about the ATO and the FedRAMP process?
Well, we actually have something called the Security Authorization Guide, which I believe is a link. There's a link on the slide available to you that explains the security authorization process. It will talk about, the authority to proceed authorizations. It'll talk about the authority to operate authorizations and what those requirements look like.
Excellent. Now, one of the questions that people ask all the time is, when should I engage with, we've had that contact out there earlier, Rob Walther or yourself. When should I give you guys a call if I think I need an ATO?
As soon as possible. Personally speaking, I would be contacting the security folks when you start the procurement process. If you know what you're going to be purchasing, then you need to contact your CISO office, or you need to get a hold of us, so that we're aware that there is an ATO that's going to be started on that purchase.
Yeah, a great kind of agile methodology, die-tap lesson learned, right? Think about the end in mind. Yeah. If you need an ATO, start that process early. That way you've got all the information out there. Is there anything that they should be putting in their solicitations?
Well, that's the other thing that we're going to be covering in the training. There is some considerations that you guys might want to think about when you're putting together the contract for the purchase, such as if you do an agency authorization, the agency is responsible for continuous monitoring, meaning they have to get the scans from the service, they have to review them, they have to monitor the system. So that kind of thing versus a JAB authorization where the FedRAMP JAB team does that.
Fantastic.
And all you would be responsible for is reviewing the reports that we provide you.
Okay. This has been really helpful, Barbara. Do you have any final thoughts or suggestions for people when they're thinking about their next ATO or their next procurement for something that might need an ATO?
Be transparent with the services that you're purchasing, that they will be reviewed for authorization. Make sure the documentation is very clear and complete that they provide to the security team. Also, be aware that if the security team finds something that might be a deal breaker, you might want to consider that as well when you're making those kind of purchases. Sometimes I think just being aware of the process is very helpful, so that you guys can cover your bases when you're making those procurement decisions.
Really great tips, Barbara. We've actually got a question in the chat too, and it asks, if there's a product FedRAMP approved or ATO'd at one of the DHS components, is there any reciprocity for other DHS components to use that, either FedRAMP agency ATO or component ATO?
What I would recommend is that I believe that Dr. Zingardi put a memo out there creating reciprocity on assessments. However, sometimes that's easier said than done, making that request to the component to get a hold of their assessment. I personally would love to talk to you about this offline, and it's a part of the streamlining process that we're working on currently for the ATO process. So if you have questions like this and if you want to contact me, I'm happy to go over it with you and see what I might be able to do to help you to clarify all of that.
And so sort of similar to that one, and maybe you can't answer this, maybe it's a kind of a specific one, but Chad asks, what if a contractor holds an ATO at your component for another DHS contract that's very similar to yours? Can you leverage that ATO then?
No. That one's pretty easy if it's not exactly the same system, and you would have to review the package and determine if there's any areas of weakness that may need to be reassessed along with any customer responsible controls. So again, questions like that, I would love to answer them offline so I could get a little bit more detail on what exactly you guys are referencing and what systems you're talking about, et cetera.
Awesome. So there you go, people. If you have questions, you can reach out to Barbara Bruff or Robert Walter. Their emails are in the link there. Barbara, this has really been great. I really appreciate your time today.
I went ahead and posted some information on the training. If you're interested, the dates are there. Let me know, and I will send you the registration link and the description of the training.
You can actually click on the title here, FedRAMP 101 in the slide. That'll take you to the link, and there was an email that was sent out yesterday about it.
Thank you very much.
Have a great one, Barbara.
You too.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's review real quick. Woof, we've covered a lot of material so far. Yeah? We've talked about robotic process automation and AI. We talked about ATOs and FedRAMP. We talked a lot about Star Wars and Star Trek with our Chief Technology Officer, David Larimore. I thought that was pretty fun. Let's now meet a team that's putting this all together. They're using a lot of RPA at Customs and Border Protection in their Procurement Innovation team. Ronnie and Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. Good morning.
Ronnie, why don't you kick us off? Tell us about how you got started innovating with bots at CBP, and please try to speak up with your answers. We're having a bit of a problem with the bridge today. We need a bot.
Yeah, sure. So I got started with a bot at a NTMA conference in 2019. I sat in on a RPA presentation for it. It was a really simple bot, and I don't even know what it did now, but I just knew it would do something amazing for procurement. And one of our directors was in the same presentation. So when that ended, we got out in the hallway and discussed, and I volunteered myself for the RPA if procurement chose to get into it. And so a few months later, leadership made that decision to jump into RPA, and I sat in a meeting with our leadership and our OIT partners and started that process to solve a growing problem at CBP, which for us at that time was deobs.
Yeah, and so talk to me about the backlog of deobligations that you had.
Right, so when this project first started, we had probably a little under 1,100 deobs, and it was growing every day. So we had to figure out a way to resolve this problem without taking away resources from other actions, such as like performing the funded actions that we're supposed to do. So it was something that was very good for us to proceed on.
And so you created this first bot, which you call D, the deobligation bot. Ronnie, tell us, how does D, the deobligation bot, work?
Right, so it's a two-step bot. The first step is to prepare the mod, and the second step is to execute the mod. So,
hey, Ronnie, hold up. You've got to speak a little louder. We're having some trouble here. All of the great content, okay. Yell if you have to.
All right. So we have this bot that it's a two-step bot, and the first step performs the preparation of the mod and sends it to the vendor, and the second step is that it executes it for you. And so what this bot does, it utilizes so many applications. It opens up the Edge browser, our PPS procurement system, our financial system, the FTDS website, the Microsoft Office suite, and Adobe Acrobat. So right there's many potential points of failure, but we've made it reliable and resourceful enough for our workforce.
That's amazing. And it does all of that just with a few clicks. It does it all by, I mean, it creates the modification for you, right?
It does. So it does everything for you. The only thing that a user has to do is just provide the contract number, funding ID number, which is primarily for FPDS, and the location of the spreadsheet. So once the user clicks play, all they got to do is do that, and the rest is automated.
Now you mentioned it's 2 steps. That was step 1. What is step 2?
So in step 2, what the bot does, it logs into our PPS website. It does the same thing that I would do. It would upload the fully executed mod into our system. It orders it in our system, and it finalizes FPDS, prints out a copy of FPDS as a PDF in your file so that you can fold it away, and emails the fully executed document to the vendor, to the core, and anyone else who you want to send that modification to.
Fantastic. I can't believe that you all have this and that it's doing all this work for you. Joe, I understand that you're currently trying to leverage this into something new, turning D into a new kind of bot. So what's next for D 2.0?
Well, what we've learned from D 1.0 is that the part 2, or the step 2, does the execution process. However, on D, the deobligation bot, it's specific to deobligations. But it's the same process and the same steps to order any award or any other modification. So we're working on ways to make it a separate order execution bot that can go in and upload the document and make the order for you. So that's the D 2.0.
And so this is not just a modification bot. Like we heard about GSA when like the 889 clauses came down. GSA created a bot that did all the 889 modifications for them. This would be going beyond that so that you could use it to award new task orders and everything else.
Correct.
Fantastic. Sign me up. Now, I've also understand you've got a bot out there that uploads documents to the electronic contract filing system. That's ECFS. And that's the one that stores contract files virtually, so you don't have to go out to this, oh, that's a really bad looking filing cabinet out there. So how did you collaborate with your Office of IT on the ECFS bot?
Well, we're grateful to have a great relationship with our OIT partners. Since we're not versed in IT procedures for these bots, so we worked with our partner to create a process document that outlined the process of the uploading documents into ECFS and to show the cost benefits of the bot to procurement. Thanks to our current UiPath contract, we don't have to have an ATO, as any bot created under the contract already has that ATO. So we're kind of lucky in that aspect.
All right. Now, I understand you don't have ECFS, the upload bot, named yet. And so let's go ahead and drop some names into the chat for their newest ECFS bot, and we'll unveil the winner at the end of the show. But Ronnie, why don't you walk us through how the ECFS upload bot works?
Sure. All right, so as you see here, this is the UiPath assistant, and that's our list of bots currently in production. So when you click on the ECFS upload bot there's a play button, and you click it, and a pop-up box comes out. And as you see here, it's very simple. You just provide your contract ID number. If it's a modification, you put down your modification number. At CBP, we go by, we call it POO. So this one here, mod 1, is POO 1. And then you just tell it, you just tell the bot where the files are located. Now, keep in mind that for your files, you just have to appropriately name it in the correct section. So something like the statement of work is, I believe, 1.1.2. So name it 1.1.2 dash. And what that dash means, because the bot is going to read the first few digits. So the dash means that that's it for you, bot. That's all you need to know. And you can rename that document to anything you want after that dash. And so, you know, once you click submit, you can just watch it do its work and, you know, do whatever you want after.
All right, and so that's, let's go to the next slide here. So we've got the bot here, we're clicking. This is the background, right? We don't actually see this when we go through this. This is all in the background, right?
Well, this one here, you can see it just goes by quick. So what it's telling you here, it's going to manually, select that field. And based on those digits that you've provided, like say 1.1.1, it's gonna one by one select each of those appropriate sections. So right there, it's pre-solicitation and purchase request documentation, and then the section for the core nomination is like 1.112, so it'll select that as well. And what we found out during our testing is that it can go as fast as uploading 2 files per minute, which is not too bad at all, considering prior to the speed enhancements on the website, it could take 3 minutes per file. So in terms of reliability and speed, I think that's pretty good.
That sounds fantastic, especially if it's 1 or 2 minutes that I don't have to spend uploading modifications to the to ECFS.
Right.
Go ahead.
And so that pop-up box happens at the end to let you know it's complete, and it also gives you a spreadsheet summary to let you know what was successfully uploaded and what was not, and it'll tell you why it was not uploaded.
All right, excellent. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat. I saw one that asks, do you still use Orchestra, and if so, where is that located in the process?
Probably Orchestrator, so we do use that, and so anything under UiPath Orchestrator, as I said before, no need for an ATO, so you know, we're good with any bots that we create under Orchestrator.
Fantastic. Now, I also saw out there, is this going to be shared with the components, and if so, how and when?
Yes, I'm glad to be able to say that. We're going to make this available to everyone at DHS. Right now, we're in the process of figuring out the best way to distribute the code to the rest of the DHS procurement workforce.
Well, there you go, Mark. Just hold tight, and we will get you the code at some point soon, and I'm sure once we do, there will be a big announcement about it because everyone's just chomping at the bit for this. Well, that's a really neat bot, Ronnie. Monica, I think we had a poll out there.
We did. We had a poll that asked the audience, would you let a bot draft your next modification? Now, I know I would. Now, let's see what everyone said. It looks like 23% of you, 40% signed me up. We had some say yes, but I would like, a lot of you said yes, but I would like to check its work. I understand you definitely want to get that second eye. A few that said maybe and let's see. We had some no's that didn't necessarily trust it to do it right, just a small percentage.
Well, maybe if it was called Phil the Filer, they would trust it better.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right, well, those first 2 bots that you showed us, they were, like you said, they were both built using UiPath, and there is a small license cost available and associated with UiPath, and like you said, it's got to go through the ATO and stuff, but I also hear that you're using Power Automate, and Power Automate's really neat because that's just part of the Office 365 suite. Anyone can get there by going to office.com/auth, and it's just there. So what are you, Joe, what are you using Power Automate to do?
So because our bot team at CBP was consisted of 1102s and 2 IT folks, we didn't necessarily have the time to sign everybody up and respond to emails, respond to questions on how do I sign up. So we utilized the Office 365 suite using Power Automate to handhold everyone as they went through the process. So the process would start with a Microsoft form. It's a link that they can open up, and it's kind of like a survey. They just fill in some information about yourself and your supervisor. From there, whenever a submission is submitted, it starts the bot process for Power Automate. It automatically signs them up for a Microsoft Teams site. It adds them there so they can gain additional information. It will automatically email them with additional links and information. From there, it will log and track in a spreadsheet so the bot team knows who is signed up to date. And then once they get the additional information and sign up in another licensing system, which is provided in the emails, then they are able to access the bots and utilize the DIOB and ECFS for signing up.
And so I don't know what you call it, whether it's a workflow or an automation, but how long did it take you to code that in Power Automate?
It would be basically like a workflow. It started out initially about 15 to 20 minutes to set it up. We've grown it since the beginning and learned some additional ways to add things in. So probably a total of about an hour of work to create the entire process flow.
And that's fantastic. And Joe, do you have an information technology background? Like, are you a computer engineer?
No, I'm actually a former meteorologist. So.
Oh, well, there you go. He can predict the weather and create Power Automate.
Yes.
Now, did you need any special training to do this?
No. The training that was provided, we had some CBP OIT training from Microsoft, and then I also did some YouTube videos to add some additional details here and there.
All right. And we'll share more of those links as we go along, and we'll get you the link for Power Automate. It's part of your Office 365 suite, and so wherever you go to get to your email online, you can get to the Power Automate as well. Sometimes you just have to click the little hamburger drop-down. I think at headquarters it's like office.gov/off. It might have a different one, but we'll get to that as we go through the show here. Now, of course, something special about Power Automate is that there's no ATO needed. We can use it right away because all of that's been done as part of the Microsoft Office 365 suite. And so anyone out there, if you have something using Word or Excel or email or Forms or Teams or any of that kind of stuff, you can try to automate that yourself with Power Automate. And if you do, share that with us. Send the PIL an email. So send Joe or Ronnie an email and let everyone know the good things that you're doing with that. Ronnie, I understand you're keeping track of some metrics, and you've got some pretty solid support to show that these tools are working for you. What are the metrics for D, the de-obligation bot?
So yeah, so what we've gotten so far, it's performed at least 141 actions in September, and it has de-obligated over 22 million now. I'd probably say 25 million, and it's reduced the time spent working on it. So like for someone like me to work on it, would have been like an hour. It's now reduced to a total of 23 minutes. So in the first part right there, you have 15 minutes. Part 1 is 15 minutes, and the execution part is like 5 to 8 minutes. So it just reduces so much time.
That's fantastic, especially when you consider that you told me that someone, and I saw in the chat, someone de-obligated the other day 2 cents, 2 pennies.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine having an hour of work to de-obligate 2 pennies when a bot like this could do it for me for 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
Now, while the bot's running for those 15 minutes, are you able to do other things in your computer, or do you just get up and get a cup of coffee?
As an attended bot, you cannot touch it, otherwise you'll kind of ruin the process. So, for those 15 minutes, that's your wellness break right there. Get a cup of coffee, walk around. It's all on you.
All right, that's not bad. Now, you also mentioned to me before the show that one of the biggest results with D is an intangible result, that it reduces human error. Talk to me about that.
Right. So for each of our bots, the goal is to create a reliable, consistent bot that quickly performs the task. So the best example would be like an accurate and consistent calculations of the obligation quantities and dollar values, along with consistent language writing in the SF30 modification. There are times where an error happens. So what we've done is provide some built-in error handling. Now, what does that mean? It's like once the bot fails, it'll provide a message back to the user and point them back to where the bot failed so that the user can go and resolve it on their end before activating the bot. And you know, some of these errors could be like a CO or a core retired, so that needs to be fixed, or just funding is expired and the budget partners will just have to update it on their end.
All right. And what about for the ECFS upload bot, which I think you're going to be calling Phil the Filer or perhaps the Busy Bot? What are your success rates like for Phil the Filer?
All right. So previously, uploading on ECFS was very slow, right? And like a file would take me maybe 3 minutes per file. But what we've gotten that down to is that if you're uploading 30 files into ECFS, instead of that taking over an hour, it's now reduced down to half of that. So it's now 15 minutes. So that's a pretty significant time savings of 75%.
That's a fantastic time saving. I mean, it's so tedious to sit there and just file those things and over and like make sure they're in the right place. If there's a bot out there that I can just tell where to go and like file them all, like I said, sign me up. Fantastic. And Joe, how about for the Power Automate Sign Up Genius? We were talking before the show and you said you hadn't really thought about how much time it was saving, but how much time is your Power Sign Up saving?
Easily 15 minutes per user between the questions and information passing and email sending. So it's now just a few seconds that the bot does it for us.
And if you think about that, Joe said he took about an hour to build that thing out. And so if 4 users sign up with his Power Automate Genius, it pays for itself. And how many people have signed up with it, Joe?
We've had well over 100 sign up so far.
Fantastic, right? And so time well spent. It's like the old adage that sometimes it takes time to save time. I don't think that's right. But anyways, all right, we've got a couple of questions in the chat here. One of them asks, is there any way to share the Power Automate coding that you've done? And so if I'm in an office and I'm over here coding for myself with Power Automate, can I share that with my team?
Inside of the Office 365 suite and Power Automate, there are ways to share templates and share what they call flows from one person to another.
Excellent. All right. Let's go on to the next slide. Ronnie, what are some tips that you might give to people if they were out there, they're listening today, they're really excited now about bots, they want to start with them in their organization? What do you tell them?
I would greatly suggest for them to, let your leadership know that you want to be part of whatever innovative project that comes along. So if you think a certain technology would be able to help your shop, don't be afraid to let your leadership know, and be able to explain that innovation in the way that you would explain things to a 5-year-old. I think that's probably the most important thing, is being able to explain it succinctly to your leadership.
Definitely. All great advice. Volunteer, get out there, make suggestions. We've got the PIL idea competition. If you've got a challenge where you think automation can help, reach out to one of the coaches. Maybe we can set up a PIL idea competition. Lots of things out there. And Joe, if people are looking for some quick tutorials, maybe to help with their coding and stuff, what kind of resources out there would you point them to?
Microsoft Office has quite a few trainings, or Microsoft themselves. Our CBP IT has some trainings available, and then YouTube is also a great resource.
Fantastic. Now what about internally in DHS or within the government?
There is an RPA Center of Excellence that's been stood up at DHS that's starting to provide resources. Another great resource is from GSA. It's a Fed RPA Community of Practice it's not only CBP and DHS that are doing RPAs, but across the government, there are a lot of resources and sharing going on in that community of practice.
Excellent. So you can, both of those are hot linked again, so you can click on either the DHS RPA Center of Excellence or the GSA Fed RPA, not FedRAMP, Fed RPA Community of Practice. And we've got a question that, are there any trainings available in PALMS or Seesaw that you'd recommend for how to automate?
I don't know if PALMS has any training off the top of my head, and I don't believe Seesaw does either.
Okay, but YouTube, Microsoft 365, RPA Center of Excellence, lots of trainings there, lots of stuff. Joe, any kind of final thoughts on RPAs and anything we've talked about, everything we've talked about today?
The best thing about it is it's another tool in our resources to do our jobs.
Ronnie, how about you?
Always keep your ear on the ground to new technology, and just keep finding ways to improve things in your work life.
Well, Ronnie and Joe, thank you so much for being with us today. I think the work that you're doing with RPA over at CBP is really inspiring, and I really appreciate you sharing it with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, this is just all so exciting. I can't wait for my robot colleague. So before we go on, we asked everyone a question, how excited they were to start working with their robot colleagues. And it looks like a lot of you, 76% said bring it on. Bots are cool, but not for writing contracts, just a few, 18%. And so it looks like all of you are really excited. All right, so Scott, I think I remember you telling me a few weeks ago that the PIL is working with the Office of Federal Procurement Policy on an AI tool.
That's right, Monica. Over the last few years, the PIL has been working on an artificial intelligence for past performance project, which we call CPARS AI. And actually, I saw a comment in the question box there about when are we going to get a bot to help with CPARS? Well, this is the beginning of that bot. It's a project that seeks to use artificial intelligence to assist with a past performance evaluation. So think about if you're in the solicitation, you're trying to make an award, and you've gotten 5 or 10 quotes, right? Each of those quoters has hundreds of past performance evaluations. And how do you find the right one? Well, right, the dirty little secret is we don't. We ask them to identify it. Sometimes we use that past performance questionnaire. Sometimes we have it listed, right? This bot, it's not a bot that we're working on, it's AI. The AI helps to solve that problem, right? You upload your statement of work. The artificial intelligence breaks down that statement of work using some natural language processing, and then it searches against the vendors that you've selected that submitted proposals, and it sorts their past performance in CPARS from the most relevant to the least relevant. And so think about someone that does cybersecurity, right? I put my statement of work in, and it sorts all the cybersecurity stuff to the top and leaves out towards the bottom or maybe down towards the middle, the IT stuff, the defense stuff, all of that stuff. So last year we started to expand upon that functionality, which is not live yet, and we were adding in market research functionality. So market research is something that we've all been doing kind of the same way for a long time. We release that request for information, then we try to read through all the submissions. We struggle with documenting which ones are small businesses, which ones are large, whether they're on GSA or NASA SOUP or whatever else. And our project is going to change all that.
Wow, that sounds really neat. So how does the AI market research change that?
Well,
tell us more.
This is a mock-up. We're working with a vendor. They're in development right now. We have 3 vendors that are developing this for us. And this is what it's going to look like. You can either upload your draft statement of work, or you can put in a few key features like your dollar value and some keywords. And you can see at the bottom there that it says millions of vendors are found. But as you enter in more and more information, it's going to go from millions to thousands to hundreds, maybe even less than that. and it's going to start to enter the data and compare that data across open source data like FPDS-NG, contract opportunities, to see who's out there doing the work that you want to be done already. So again, if I'm looking for cybersecurity, it's going to start pulling across vendors that have recently been awarded contracts for cybersecurity. Maybe you're doing emergency management at FEMA. You can put that in and find vendors who are doing emergency management, maybe for USAID or for other agencies, but it's just as relevant to you. So once you click the button, you'll start to see results. And you can drill into those results. So it's not just giving you something that you don't trust, but you can see for yourself that there are what contracts they've been awarded, with what agencies, for what value, and in the end state, we hope that it also matches up with the CPARS data so that these two systems talk to each other, and so that you can see whether the vendor who got an award for emergency management or cybersecurity, how did it go? What was their performance like? You can see really easily here that the green stuff, well, that's good stuff, and the red and orange stuff, well, that's not so good stuff. And it's also hashtagged and marked, and so you can see it in a lot of different ways. A lot of functionality. The next steps for this is that we expect to finish up development this spring. Over the summer, we're going to pilot this AI for market research program. And so if you'd like to be part of that pilot, send me an email, scott.dhs.hq.dhs.com, and we will get you into that pilot so you can see how AI is going to work for you.
Wow, and it looks like people are really excited in the chat. I see one says this is truly new and exciting innovation. So really exciting, great things going across DHS.
I think it's going to be great. Well, I think that's about it, folks. Let's move to the next slide.
All right.
Well, I'd really like to thank everyone who was here with us today. I want to thank Sarah, Barbara, Ronnie, Joe, David, and I want to thank all of you here too for joining us today for the 62nd PIL webinar. I hope that you've learned a lot about emerging technology and how it's going to change the world of procurement for the better. We look forward to seeing you next time on PIL webinar 63, which will be coming up in April.
All right. Just as a reminder, if you haven't done so already, you must sign in with your full name and DHS email address using the chat pod to receive CLP credit. All right, so we have a PILcast new micro series available. Each episode will be about 10 minutes or less, and there are currently 10 available for your viewing. Go to the next slide. If we have our DHS PIL homepage. If you view our homepage, here you'll be able to find recorded webinars, with the corresponding documents, and this webinar will actually be uploaded to the website within a few days after the recording. There's also the component Acquisition Innovation Advocate is available, and you can submit ideas for the PIL Idea Competition. And the PIL YouTube page with the PILcast series is also there. We also have issued 2,085 PIL DigiBadges. If this is something that you're interested in, you can earn your level 1 DigiBadge by either attending 5 PIL webinars, applying one innovation technique on your own, or attending a PIL bootcamp. If you're interested in receiving support, we have an electronic way of submitting your coaching support, the actual one-pager, and so you can find that on our PIL homepage as well. All of our boot camps, we have all of our upcoming trainings here. These slides are available for download. These are the trainings that are coming up. We have a few PIL boot camps in April, May. We have a next level, PIL boot camp, the next level in May and June. And then we have another coaching clinic in June as well. All right, if you may not have enough time, right, the PIL boot camps are offered virtually, but if you don't have enough time, you can also go into CSOT. You can watch our 1-hour condensed version of the boot camp called the PIL Primer. This isn't meant to replace the experience or training, but serves as a placeholder until you can attend the next boot camp, or if you need a refresher. If you need any samples, you can find them at the FAI.gov periodic table of acquisition innovations. And we really do thank you. We thank you all for coming to our webinar, and we'll see you at the next PIL webinar. Thank you, everyone.